Hi everyone, this is Dr. Ernesto from Attaboy Cowboy, and in today's video we're going to talk about how to protect yourself and avoid getting deported as a new immigrant to the United States of America. Now recently I was in Tijuana with my friend Alistair, who is a reporter, and he was reporting on all the people that are being deported into Mexico. Basically, we got to tour the new facilities that the government in Mexico is setting up to receive all these people that they're anticipating are going to be sent over there. They're getting empty warehouses, they're installing beds, makeshift kitchens, everything, medical facilities, so they can accommodate all the people that they're expecting to be deported from the United States. Now that's on the Mexican side. Okay, so they're getting ready for the migrants that Trump's going to send back, and they're going to house them in these different buildings here. So they have like the National Guard here. Hola. And they're just going to put them in this. ¿Qué es esto? ¿Un casino o qué? ¿Este edificio qué es?
Desconozco, caballero, así que no estoy autorizado para dar.
Oh, okay. All right, está bien. So it looks like it's some kind of parking garage with like offices on top. And they're going to stick a bunch of people in there. You can see the mattresses there, the brand new. See the mattresses over there?
Yeah.
They're getting ready to start bringing in all the people from Echo Park, Silver Lake, everywhere else, East LA.
¿Cómo están?
Okay, this is pretty serious. These guys are ramping up for the people that are getting deported. They're sending in the National Guard here, and they're basically like getting all these old unoccupied buildings, and they're unloading truckloads of supplies, beds, and everything else, taking care of all the people that are going to get deported here. So it's going to be pretty gnarly. This is for all the beds they're going to set up here for the migrants. Esto es para todos los camas que van a construir para los inmigrantes. Están trayendo trocas así grandes de materiales. Postes para las camas. Tuvieran otro que son muchos colchones, comida. Están preparándose. Tienen aquí el Guardia Nacional preparando por toda la gente que van a venir. Now again, that's on the Mexican side. Now on the American side, we're ramping things up. Over the last few weeks, you're hearing about a lot of people being deported, and right now they're basically using scare tactics. They're using military planes and they're publicizing it everywhere. And it looks scary. You see innocent people that really haven't done anything that are shackled, and they're on military planes with soldiers with big guns, and they're sending them to Venezuela, Colombia, Mexico, all over the place, India, Africa. And that is being broadcast all over the world, and they're basically saying, don't come. We've received a lot of people the last few years, and the government just decided that they want to time down an immigration. Now, what if you're already here? Well, it's good to understand where you stand in all this, okay? If you're an American citizen, like myself, for example, and I do something, I commit fraud, I do a crime, whatever, there's nowhere to send me. This is where I'm from. They're going to send me to jail where I don't want to go, but that's the only place I could really go. Now, if you're from another country, then you do have somewhere they can send you. After American citizen, in terms of legal status and the people that absolutely get to stay here, are naturalized citizens. Those are people that have immigrated from other countries and they became an American citizen. Now those people are pretty much, they're gonna be here. However, if they commit fraud, they do some egregious crime or something like that, they try to overthrow the US government, they're terrorists, whatever, they can strip you of your naturalized citizenship. It's called denaturalization. And they can actually deport you back to wherever you came from in the world, okay? But that's probably the second hardest. Now, after that, according to what's happening recently with the new administration in the United States, it's a free-for-all. Now, there's parole, there's U visas, there's asylum seekers, there's refugees, there's all sorts of different immigration statuses, including people that have green cards, okay? Now, all these people, because I talk to a lot of patients that are in all these different types of status, and I actually call and I ask my immigration attorney, who has helped me with other employees and family members, etc. And I ask them questions. They say, look, basically, if you're not an American citizen, you do not have a right to be here. Now, you might talk to your attorney, they might say, oh, that's not true. You're an asylum seeker or whatever. You have a right to be here. Technically, yes. But remember, laws are up to interpretation. And the way the new administration is interpreting laws are very different than they did in the past. I've been reading about people that have been deported that have some type of legal status here. And the reason being is the government is saying, hey, well, you know what? You're legal now, but you came in illegally. So you broke the law, so you should have never been granted a status here. So that was an error, so we're gonna deport you. And the problem with that is you might say, well, I'll get an attorney and I'll fight the case. Sure, if you're living in the United States and you have the money to pay for an attorney, yeah, you could probably do that and maybe you'll have some luck. But I have an attorney right now that helps me. He charges me $995 an hour, $1,000. That's what he charges. Not all attorneys are that expensive, but attorneys are very expensive. Now, if they get you off the street and you have a green card or whatever, and they see that you have some type of infraction on your record or an irregularity they don't agree with, and they deport you, how are you gonna pay for an attorney if in Mexico, the minimum wage is about $8 a day, Venezuela, it's about $10 a month, Colombia, it's 300 bucks a month or what, about $10 a day. So obviously you're not gonna be able to afford an immigration attorney, and that's what their calculation is. They're gonna deport you. Once you get deported, you're not gonna have the means to fight the case, so you're gonna have to stay wherever you're at. Now, I'm gonna give you some tips. I'm gonna give you 15 tips on how to avoid some of these problems. Tip number 1, your clothing, okay? Now, as a new immigrant, or if you don't have papers or legal status or whatever, you don't wanna call a lot of attention to yourself, okay? You wanna try to blend in, look like an American. And I'm gonna give you an example. No matter where I go in the world, I can tell when I see a European, because I see these shorts that nobody in the US would wear, okay? I love Europe, but these shorts are very distinctive. There's nothing wrong with these clothes, but this just shows, it screams, I'm European, I'm French or German or wherever. You're not from the United States. Americans don't tend to wear clothing like this. It's so tight, okay? We don't dress like that. Probably because most Americans are obese, we wear things that are loose, okay? Europeans tend to be a little thinner and trimmer than Americans, probably because they don't have all the processed food we have. So they wear these types of tight clothing. It's very distinctive. Now, new immigrants to the United States, now this is just something I'm sharing with you. You might not agree with me, but as an American born and raised here, I see people, I see a lot of immigrants. I treat them as patients. They work for me in the work that I do, and I can tell right off the bat. So this is just my experience. First off, the clothes you wear, your shoes. Americans generally wear Nikes, so you should wear Nikes. Don't wear Pumas, don't wear Adidas. Now, are there Americans that wear Adidas? Yes, of course there are, but they're not very popular. And remember, it's not just one thing. It's called tacit knowledge. It's knowledge you can't really explain, but you look at a person, you put it all together. You see all these different aspects, and then it all creates an image of where you're from. That's how you can tell, okay? So wearing Adidas clothing, Puma, that's a dead giveaway, okay? Most immigrants buy those clothes because those are popular in other countries. those are German companies. They're not American, Puma or Adidas. So you might want to switch your clothing to Nike. You don't want to go overboard wearing a bunch of clothes with American flags. I mean, if you have some here and there, that's nice. People like that. But definitely don't wear clothing that shows you're a fan of some other country. I see people here walking around that don't have papers and they're wearing Mexico shirts, or they're wearing El Salvador, or Guatemala, or Colombia. It's like, that's screaming, come and get me. Don't wear soccer hats. Soccer is not an American sport. It's not very popular here. So if you're wearing all these soccer clothing, they're gonna know you're a foreigner. You know, learn to like baseball or basketball or American football. You can wear a LA Rams jersey or a USC t-shirt or something like that for American sports. We don't play cricket very much here. People are not generally soccer fans here. So those types of sporting gear are a dead giveaway. They're probably from another country. Now, some of my patients tell me, well, doc, I love, Peru or Argentina, wherever I'm from. I want to show my pride. I get it, but giving your migratory status, it's probably not a good time. Keep your love in your heart. You don't need to advertise to everybody, look, I'm from another place, come and get me, to ICE or to immigration. Tip number 2, almost everybody has a phone these days, okay? What kind of phones do Americans have? The majority iPhones, okay? They're a little more expensive. They're the best phone you could buy. I'm sure there's people who are gonna disagree, but it's just a reality. They're American, although they're made in China, yes, but it's an American brand. Now, when I travel around the world, remember, I travel quite a bit. I've been to over 160 countries. What do you see? You see people using Samsung and Android phones everywhere. You rarely see iPhones unless you go to wealthy countries in Europe or you go to some parts of China. But generally, they're going to use all sorts of other phones that are not American. Now, we Americans, because we are used to seeing people with iPhones, we recognize it right away. You pick up their phone, they see you with some weird phone with all these different gadgets on it, or it looks like a book, and they might be great phones, okay? But it's just not something that we use here in the United States. So right away, when you see people with Android phones, Samsung phones, all whatever, these other types of phones, they're probably not an American, because that's not something we generally use. And if you're gonna live in the United States, it's probably a good idea to have an iPhone, because they're much more compatible. Sometimes I have problem sending attachments, pictures, etc. to people that have these other types of phones. Get an iPhone. Tip number 3. And this applies to people here in California, and it may apply to some other states, I'm not sure. We started a program here in California where we started allowing illegal immigrants to get driver's license. Now, over 1 million illegal immigrants got a driver's license in California. And you might say, that's great, okay? But think about it. The federal government has access to a lot of the databases in the states and all over the country. So if they're trying to find you, how do you think they're gonna find you? They're gonna go into the database, they're gonna see if you have a license, and they're gonna see where you live. A lot of people wonder, well, how does ICE find people? How do they know where they live? How do they know to go look for them? That's how they know. Remember, this is one of the most, if not the most, technologically advanced country in the world. So the government has a lot of assets. So the government has a lot of resources at its disposal. And the new administration has done something that has never been done before. We have immigration, but they brought in the FBI, the DEA, all these other law enforcement agencies to help out with immigration. So they're pooling the resources. So now immigration has a lot more sophisticated ways of locating people within the United States so they can deport them. So if you got one of these licenses, you're gonna be a target. They're gonna know where you live, and it's gonna be easier for them to find you. So what can you do? You might want to change your address, change your mailing address. You might want to just get rid of your license. I'm not sure, but just something to keep in mind, that if you have a license to drive and you're not a legal resident in the United States, it is going to be easier to find you. If you're not using the license very much to begin with, and you have a car and you don't drive it very much, it might be a good idea just to get rid of the car. It just calls more attention to you. And use public transportation. The public transportation is very good in Los Angeles and generally pretty good in most of the United States. So you might want to just go back to using public transportation. That's gonna entail you having less risk of having run-ins with law enforcement. Remember, in some of these states, law enforcement is working with immigration. So if you get pulled over in Florida or in Texas or some of these other states, they have the right to ask you, what is your immigration status? And if you can't prove you're an American citizen, they can call immigration, they can facilitate your deportation. So if you're not legal or if you're on a temporary status here, you might want to consider not driving and maybe getting rid of that driver's license so they don't know where you live. Tip number 4, don't blast loud music. I live in Los Angeles. I have tenants. I can tell who the Hispanic tenants are. Those are people that generally immigration are looking for. Now you might say, well, hey, I like doing that. In general, it's not a very nice thing to do, to be uncourteous to your neighbors. You want to be respectful of people's space, and that includes auditory space. So it's not a good practice. I travel quite a bit, and again, in other countries, I know a lot of people do that, and in some neighborhoods, they like it. I know I go some places in South America, and there's people that pull out a big boom box. It's like 3 feet high and like 3 feet wide, and they blow the salsa music down the whole street, and everybody likes it. That's cool, but that's not something we do in the United States. It's not cool, and it's against the law in most places. So if you do that, it's against the law everywhere. So if in the United States, so if you do that, you're gonna call a lot of attention to yourself. And imagine if you're immigration, you're looking for who to come get. Well, you're gonna look for people that are blasting the radio. That's a good sign. That's probably someone that is not from the United States, because Americans that are born and raised here generally are more respectful in terms of sound. We don't generally participate in noise pollution, so we don't generate music all over the place. Tip number 5, try to work the night shift. Remember, immigration is 24 hours, but generally when they're doing these ICE raids and stuff like that, they go around looking for people during business hours, 9 to 5, daylight hours. They don't generally try to drag people out of bed. Although they have been known to do that, it's not as common. So if you have the option, instead of walking around in broad daylight or working at some place in the middle of the day where they can come do an immigration raid, work the night shift. That's going to be less likely to have run-ins with immigration. Tip number 6, avoid places where a lot of immigrants hang out if you're concerned about being racially profiled or deported. Here in Los Angeles, there's one place that comes to mind. It's called MacArthur Park. And I've actually heard on NPR, National Public Radio here in the United States, they call it the birthing ground for illegal immigrants. Now, it's not a derogatory term. It just means that a lot of people that are new arrivals go to that area. And it's true. There are a lot of new arrivals. And in fact, most of the people there are not legal. They say about 30% of the population in Los Angeles is illegal. They came from other places. They don't have their documents right. So if you're an immigration official and you want to make sure you catch some people that day, because you don't want to go back to your boss and say, oh, I made no arrest today. That's not going to look good. You're not going to be promoted. You're not going to earn your wages. So everybody tries to do a good job. So if I was an immigration official and I'm trying to figure out where to go, that's an easy place. You're going to go places where there's high concentrations of immigrants. So try to avoid those places. If you have friends you want to hang out with, bring them to your house or go to their house and hang out. Don't go to the park and hang out where there's like thousands of illegal immigrants. That's not a good place to hang out. You're not going to be safe there. Tip number 7, avoid protesting. Now, recently there's been a lot of protests here in Los Angeles. One of them, the immigrants walked out onto the Hollywood freeway and blocked it during the Grammys or the Oscars, something like that. And not cool. That just plays into this negative narrative. You don't want to be disruptive. You don't want to be disrespectful. Now, of course, there's nothing wrong with protesting. We Americans love to protest. But if you're not an American and you're protesting, probably not a good idea. Think about January 6th when all those rioters tried to overthrow the Capitol. That was not cool. The FBI got involved. they used all their technology and they found over 1,600 people and they started prosecuting them. So remember, the government has a lot of technology and all of them are pooling their resources. So if you're illegal or undocumented or your papers are weird or whatever's going on, and you go to those protests, the government is most likely going to have drones or something, and they're going to be able to look at everybody's face. They're going to keep you in a database. They're going to say, hey, this person is a troublemaker. Not only are they an asylum seeker or illegal immigrant or whatever, but they're a troublemaker on top of it. So we're going to target those people. Unfortunately, that's just a fact of life. I'm not saying that you can't express yourself, but in my opinion, if I wanted to avoid those types of situations where I get sent off somewhere I don't want to be, probably not the best place to go to. Tip number 8, of course, do not drink in public spaces. Now, I live in Los Angeles. There's a lot of Latinos here from all sorts of places, and I see it all the time. I don't drink, but it amazes me how much a lot of these people drink, and that's cool. If that's what they like to do, they should do it. However, public drunkenness is illegal in the United States. Drinking in public is illegal in the United States everywhere. In other countries, it's not like that. You can drink. I go to Colombia, I go to Mexico, people drink everywhere and they hang out in public and they drink. It's not legal here. So don't walk around with a brown paper bag. The police, immigration, they know what you're doing, okay? When I go to the parks here, I oftentimes will see large groups of immigrant people drinking, falling down drunk. They're on the floor passed out. And then the next day they're working somewhere, working hard and contributing to society. And that's great. But it's better to drink inside your house in privacy. Don't break the law and don't bring attention to yourself. Those are people that, if you're an immigration official, those are the people they want to get first. People that are not respecting our laws. Tip number 9, be careful with sending money home to wherever you're from. And let me tell you a story. I have a friend. Her name is Tatiana. Her mom got a green card. She was really excited. She came to Florida. She worked for a few months under the table because she wasn't really supposed to be working. She got this money and she started wiring it home through Western Union. She got money, she started wiring it home. She thought, oh great, I'm gonna help out my family, I'm gonna build a new house, whatever her plans were at home. After her 3-4 months, she went back home, she partied it up, and 6 months later, she thought, okay, I'm gonna go back to the United States and I'm gonna do another round of working so I can make some more money. The second time when she came back, they stopped her at the airport and they said, hey, you were sending money from the United States back home. And she said, okay. And they said, you were working. And she said, no, I wasn't working. Well, how can you prove you weren't working? And that's very unusual that you have cash all of a sudden and you're sending it out of the country. Remember, it's not a court. They don't have to prove anything. All they have to do is suspect something. So they suspected, and they were right. She was working under the table and she was sending money home. And most people that immigrate to the United States, they do it because they want to send money home, right? And you think, well, everybody does it. Yeah, but if you're not here legally, you're not supposed to be working here. If you're here in a tourist visa or you say you're a refugee or you're an asylum seeker and you're waiting for your work permit and you don't have it yet and you work, you're technically breaking the law. So they can use that to deport you. In my friend's mom's case, she got deported. They didn't allow her entry. And she was really upset because she got a 10-year visa, a tourist visa, and she thought she was going to be coming and going for the next decade into the United States. No way. She came in for that 3-month stint. She went back home, partied it up, and when she came back, they stopped at the airport, gave her all this interview, told her what she was doing, put her on a plane and sent her right back. So remember, when you wire money in the United States, they're going to require you show an identification. They're going to know who you are, and they're going to know that you're sending money. Sending money in itself is not a crime, but working without permission to work is illegal in the United States. And on top of it, if you're not paying taxes or filing a tax return, well, that's another problem. So what can you do? Well, some people will ask their friends to send money overseas because maybe they have a legal status, maybe they're citizens, something like that. That might be a viable option so that you don't keep coming up every week, every month as sending money, which you're not supposed to be doing. Tip number 10, try to blend in. Remember, most Americans are very humble, okay? We dress with humble clothing, we're simple. In fact, when I travel around the world, people often say, oh yeah, you can tell Americans because they look like they've been hanging out at the beach all day. And that's cool, but that's what shows that you're an American. Now, oftentimes I'll see my tenants or I'll see my workers and they're not from here. They wear flashy clothing. They'll wear bright red colors. Now, I'm not saying that Americans don't do that. There are Americans that do that stuff. But again, we're looking at the whole picture here, okay? When an immigration official looks at you, they're trained. They know certain details to look for. If you have 1 or 2 details, then fine. But if you have 2, 3, 4, or 5, then they start saying, okay, this fits the profile of a person that is not from the United States. Let's go check on them. If they're in LA, they're gonna say, well, there's probably a 1/3 chance that this person is not from here, so I'm probably gonna be right, okay? So don't get flashy haircuts. Don't get weird haircuts. Just get a regular haircut. Don't get flashy clothing. Just wear regular colors. Don't wear bright red, bright yellow, bright green. People generally do not wear those types of clothes. They wear stuff like this. It's kind of boring. Okay? And don't wear flashy jewelry. Most Americans don't even wear jewelry. If we do, it's very simple. They're not flashing big gold watches or big gold chains or all this, all these ostentatious behaviors. We don't do that. That brings a lot of attention to you. And again, yes, there are Americans that do that. I'm thinking of like the rap videos and stuff. Sure, people do that, but generally it's not something that people do. It causes a lot of attention. On that same note, if you're talking on your phone, use earpieces, okay? That's generally what we do here. We try not to invade other people's space with noise. So people use headphones and they talk to people. When I see my workers, they answer the phone, they put it on loudspeaker. Hey, how are you? How's it going? Oh, I'm doing good. I'm at work today. And they're yelling. You can hear the other person yelling. Sometimes when I ride the bus or I ride the train here, I see people doing that. And I'm like, right away, this person is not from here because that's rude. You don't do that. You don't yell out to your phone and you don't put it on speaker so everybody around you can hear. That's very rude, and it definitely makes you stick out like a sore thumb because people generally don't do that. If you don't have an ear set, you put your cell phone to your ear and you talk and you don't yell because there's people around you. Think about what's going on. And generally, it's just a good idea to be courteous, right? Tip number 11, if you drive a car or if you want to buy a car, buy an American car, buy a Ford, buy a Cadillac, buy a Chevrolet, buy a GMC. Don't buy a Toyota or a Honda or some other brand. Now, you might say, yeah, but I see a lot of them and I see a lot of Americans driving them. Yes, but again, we're looking at the profile, okay? In countries like Central America and a lot of these other places, all they drive are Japanese cars. Reason being is a lot of those places, American cars don't make their way down there. So a lot of people here used to sell their old Japanese cars and they used to ship them down there. Now, obviously, they've become more popular over here, but generally speaking, you want to try to drive an American car. You don't want to drive a foreign car because right away, if I see a Toyota truck in LA, you're probably from Central America. Sorry, but that's just the way it is. And if you get a car with regular colors, black or white or gray, something regular, oftentimes I have these folks who live next door, they're undocumented, and they have an orange car, and the other one has an electric blue car. Now again, most people don't drive those cars, and it causes a lot of attention. So they see you an orange Toyota down the street, and you don't generally look like an American, you're gonna bring a lot of attention to yourself, and people are probably gonna racially profile you and pull you over. Tip number 12, good hygiene. Now, a lot of my workers, I'm not sure why, but they don't have real good hygiene and they have very poor oral health, okay? If you're a new immigrant, and with all due respect, and not, of course, not everybody has this problem, so I don't want to generalize, and of course Americans have the same issues, but take good care of your hygiene. Look nice and neat. Don't look dirty. Brush your teeth. Some of my workers have a bunch of metal teeth. That is really obvious. We don't use metal teeth here. As soon as you can afford it, fix your teeth. Maybe get some porcelain teeth or get something that looks more typical here in the United States. But definitely have good hygiene. Myself, I look at the patients, they come in, I can tell right away they're not from the United States. A lot of them have very poor oral hygiene. Their gums are inflamed, their teeth are dirty. They look kind of beat up because they don't eat good. They eat a lot of processed food, they drink soda, and they look really run down. And a lot of them have really hard jobs. They work their tails off. So if you're a new immigrant, take good care of yourself. Eat good food, eat whole food, eat fruits, eat vegetables, eat grains, eat beans. Don't eat too much meat, don't eat processed food, don't drink sodas. Brush your teeth, take good care of your hair, look clean and smell good. You don't have to use cologne, but just take a shower, use soap. That makes you look more like a typical American walking around, okay? Sometimes I see people from the Middle East or from, different countries, and some of them have a stronger body odor. That's because some of those places, I've been there, and it's different. It's hot, there isn't a lot of water. I've been to India several times, and people don't generally shower every day in India just because there isn't water everywhere. Now, it's not an offense to anyone. It's just there's different cultures all over the world and the environment is different. So people adapt to that. But here, generally, people have different rules for hygiene, and that's something you want to be conscious of. Make sure you maintain good hygiene and you look nice and clean and presentable. Tip number 3, be conscious of the public charge rule. Now, the public charge law has been around for a long time. It's nothing new. It's just that most administrations are not enforcing it. But the new administration is going to enforce it and did in the past. Public charge means, okay, you came over here, you're an asylum seeker, you came on a U visa or some other type of program, right? The idea is that you are able to take care of yourself. You can cover your own expenses, that you don't become a charge on society. Some folks come over here and right away they say, oh good, I can get Medi-Cal or Medicaid, get free health insurance, I can get food stamps, I can get, public housing, I can get all this kind of stuff. Sure, you can qualify for some of that stuff, but remember, in Los Angeles, this is a sanctuary city. California is a sanctuary state. The state might say, oh, you're fine. In California, we give Medi-Cal or Medicaid to immigrants that are undocumented. In other states, they don't. That doesn't mean it's okay, because there's a state law and there's federal law. Federal law says you're not supposed to. That's called the public charge rule, that you're not going to ask for public assistance because you just got here. You have to make your own way, or you have to ask your own family or friends to help you so you can support yourself. That's just the way the law works. Now, if you ask for Medi-Cal, food stamps, all this kind of stuff, and you're undocumented, or you're in some type of legal status where you're not a citizen, the government is going to know where you live. You have to give an address. So they're going to know where you live. And again, they have access to all these databases. And the federal law is immigration. Immigration is run by the federal government, not by the states. So in California, we don't have our own immigration. It's the federal government that funds ICE, immigration services, border patrol, all that. So they come into the states regardless if it's a sanctuary city or sanctuary state. That doesn't mean that they can't come here. They can come here. They have jurisdiction. They're part of the federal government. What it means is they're not going to cooperate with them. In states where they cooperate, let's say they arrest someone for doing a crime, and they find out they're not a legal resident of the United States. They'll call immigration and say, hey, we got this guy who was stealing a car or whatever, and he's also an illegal immigrant. Oh, okay. So they may put him in jail for a while, and when he's done with his jail sentence, instead of letting him free into the street, they hand him over to immigration. Immigration deports him. In sanctuary places like where I live, what they do is they don't cooperate. The person commits a crime, they put him in jail, and when they're coming out, instead of calling the immigration saying, hey, this guy's getting out of jail, he's a criminal, you know, here he is, come take him and deport him, they don't say anything. They just let him go out into the public. Now, that's a state decision, it's a city decision, but the federal government, if they know you got arrested or something, because they can also find out, remember there's databases, you committed a crime, or let's just say you're illegal, and they know you're not here legally, they're gonna use the fact that you asked for public assistance to deport you. And they're gonna know your address, so they're gonna come look for you. Now let's say you're here legally, let's say you came on a parole or on some type of other visa, okay? Public charge rule applies, that's just the law. They can use that, they can say, oh yeah, you got here legally and you're here legally, but you broke the law by asking for public assistance. And you might say, oh, I didn't have enough money to buy food, or I couldn't afford the housing. That's not the government's fault, so they can use that as an excuse to deport you. Tip number 14, pay your taxes. Remember, anybody that is in the United States, whether you're legal or illegal or whatever your migratory status is, you have to pay taxes. Like they say, the only things that are for sure are death and taxes. You have to pay taxes. Now you might say, yeah, I went to the store and I bought some donuts and they charged me taxes. Yeah, that's not the same thing. I'm talking about income taxes. You have to file an income tax every year. And you might say, well, I don't have a social. Well, if you have a social, obviously use your social. If you don't have a social, you apply what's called an EIN. That is issued by an IRS. You can go online and get an EIN for free, and that allows you to file a tax return. If you don't file a tax return, you're technically breaking the law, so they can use that as an excuse to deport you. Think about the famous gangster Al Capone. He was like really good at what he did, and the government, the police couldn't figure out a way to get him and put him in jail. They tried everything. And at that time, they were paying off all the corrupt officials in Chicago to help cover for him. But how did they finally nail him? They got the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service. They said, has this guy filed a tax return? No tax returns on file. Great. Tax evasion. They arrested him and they put him in jail for a long time because he had never filed, but he was driving around in all these fancy cars and obviously he had money. So he got in trouble for tax evasion. So don't get in trouble for tax evasion. That's a really easy one. A lot of people think that they're good, they haven't done anything, but little things like that, that's against the law. Make sure you're paying your taxes, and make sure if you haven't filed your tax returns, go back and file all the previous year's tax returns. You can do that. And it also helps you if you ever want to fix your papers or become a naturalized U.S. citizen. You have to show proof that you've paid your taxes all the years you've been here in the United States. You have to prove that you've been a good citizen. That's one way you prove it, is that you're responsible and you pay your taxes. So if you ever would like to someday become an American citizen, make sure you pay your taxes and do it through filing a tax return. Tip number 15, learn English. Now, wherever you live in the United States, if you're in France, learn French. If you're in Italy, learn Italian. If you're in the United States, learn English. If you're walking around with a bunch of people and you're speaking some other language, obviously the immigration officials are going to know you're not from here. So they're going to want to pull you over. It just makes you more of a target. On top of that, think long term. Let's say you want to stay in the United States. You want to have a successful experience here. What's the best thing you could possibly do? Learn English. It's going to make it easier for you. You're going to have better job prospects. You're going to be able to study. You're going to be able to do a lot of stuff. It's going to be easier to function in society. You're going to be able to read forms. You're going to be able to fill out forms. You're going to be able to do a lot of stuff. Some of my workers, they don't speak English and they struggle. They tell me some have been here 20, 30 years You know, some of them are already legal residents and they still don't speak English. And because of that, they've always kind of been second-class citizens. They've never actually been able to move up socially. There's a lot of social mobility in the United States, a lot of opportunities to become wealthy and to improve your life and the life of your family. But if you don't learn English, you're not going to have full access to that. That's just a reality. You need to speak English. Even in places where a lot of people speak Spanish, like in Miami, you still should speak English because that's only one part of the United States. And that's not the whole country. Let's say you want to study, let's say you want to fill out papers, you still need to speak English. So learning English is something really easy to do. Get an application, a free one like Duolingo, and practice every day. And that's going to make it easier for you to kind of blend in and not call attention to yourself. So I hope that helps. Those are my 15 tips for trying to avoid being racially profiled or deported from here in the United States. I hope that helps. And if you have any questions, please comment below. Thank you and goodbye.